All right, so let's get started. So the concept and idea of this webinar was really while everyone's kind of at the point of seeding, some might be finished, some might be in the middle, just taking the opportunity to lay all our cards out, kind of give everyone a bit of an update, where we're going with the different models and bits and pieces. And then I've got a bit of a demo, so it's not a live demo, I've been able to record it and kind of snap that together to try to give everyone a better understanding of the connectivity from the hardware at the point of harvesting, so the CropScan sensor within the harvester, and then outputting the data to the Engage app. Okay, so with any webinar, we should probably have an agenda. The agenda probably helps me more than anyone else, but really what we want to work today is a bit of a product introduction. So we've really got two models now, so kind of making that clear. We generally don't go too much in depth into the technology, but I'll do that a little bit more today and kind of try to explain not the NIR sense of how that works, but really the operation of the sample head. So you've got to get an understanding of what's triggering that and kind of what's the key points within the sample head, because that does all the heavy lifting. Then I'll kind of run through the CropScan 3300H, the 4000 VT, and how it operates and works. Then what features are within both units? So what comes with what? I think that's really important. Then understanding what's available on each brand or model, okay? Because I think now as we've progressed with CAN bus and ISOBus, that can get a little bit confusing. So from a farmer perspective, it's really important to hear it probably from ourselves of what's included, because that could get a little bit muddled through the dealer network. And then I've got a couple of demo videos to jump through. So, you know, the ability with AI now, all our videos are done with an AI voiceover. So, which is really good for me because my voice is a bit harsh. But having that ability to kind of string it together, and I think you can hit the points a little bit better on the training aspect. Bit of a case study. I've been lucky to work with a grower in Lake Grace in WA, Leon Clark and Sarah Clark. They've had crop scans for a number of years now, so they've kind of shared a bit of data with, you know, doing their maps and bits and pieces with them. So we've been able to kind of hone in on this ROI. You know, lots of stuff we kind of throw back on Broden, but it's good to see some how it's operating in other soil types and systems and those sorts of things. And obviously just hitting those key benefits so you can walk away and go, you know, really, is this technology going to be an advantage to me? And sort of at what level can I kind of start to reap some rewards, and what profitability can I get out? And then we'll just open up for Q&A. Then you can ask me questions, and then I can dial in and kind of give you examples of, you know, how, what, and why. So just before we get going, just a bit of an introduction for myself. My name is Matt Clancy. I'm the General Manager of CropScan Ag. So a bit of the history. The technology really dates back to about the 2000. That's when the first benchtops were released. So there was a project with CBH, FOSS, and my father to develop a portable on-farm grain analyzer to measure the protein, moisture, and oil. Very much like what they had the silos, but portable unit. So that's dating back to 1998 when that project started. And one of the offshoots of that project was to develop an on-combine system. So the vision was many years ago. I think I was still in high school when that was kind of being conceptualized. So to now bring that to life, and, you know, we've been doing this for over 10 years now. It's great to see the adoption and development of it. It's really exciting. I really am passionate about the data. I think in the first years, the usage and the utilization and the access to the data was a big limitation. You know, older computers, data still on USBs. So now with the investment that we put into the Engage app and the cloud connectivity, I really think that kind of brings that to life. And I had a grower back in a few months back, and they were on their second generation CropScan. So they had the first 3000H, had that for many years, never made a map. We did a bit of data training and tried to coach and kind of support. But now with the new system, they kind of said, oh, it's just so much easier now. You know, the data goes in the cloud. We've got a mapping system to do that. So they could really see the development and improvement in that. And so that was really powerful and positive to hear that feedback from that grower. Okay, so really, what is the technology and what are we talking about? So the technology, just think it is based off what we are dealing with at the testing stands or the receival sites. So they use a near-infrared transmission grain analyzer, which really means the light passes through the kernels of grain, and that light transflects off the surface of the seeds as it goes through. So really, the systems have the capabilities of measuring protein, oil, moisture, and starch. Okay, that's pretty much it. They're pretty, broadband spectrophotometers that have the ability to measure those type of things. So we really specialize in the grains industry because that's what your wheat and your barley and your canola and all those crop types kind of have. The only crop type that we can't really do and do it really not at all is sunflower seeds. Sunflower seeds are too large and dark. They just absorb too much light. So the signal going through the sensor is limited. So we specifically designed the technology on what the world leading or the grain buyers are all using. They all use a phosphorescent larger benchtop system. Okay. So we've designed the system to kind of fit within there around that. The difference between our system is ours is solid state. There's no moving optics within that. So it can sit in the combine. It can sit outside now on the new 4000s, and it can kind of handle that rough environment. We started off firstly with a sensor, but really now we're trying to package a solution. We feel that that is the requirement from the farmer. And I'm even driven more to further automate the development or the creation of the maps. I really want to make this fast and simple. If you could create all your maps in a couple of hours, entering in some numbers, I think that's our goal, and that's what we want to try to achieve. And that's all driven through the development and the more money we put into Engage Harvest Manager and the Nutrient Manager. So what does this technology really give back to the farmer and everyone on the call? Maybe you're not into grain inventory and management, but really we are able to collect the information from the field to the grain buyer. And if you think big picture, 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the track, that information for the applied fertilizer, the fuel that you're using, all that data now can be collected within a site. And that would generally be your field ops or John Deere Operations Center. They have very good data connectivity. And actually we can kind of pull that data back to other systems and actually start to create metrics and compute that information. So from a carbon point of view, if we look down the road, we should be able to then score the carbon footprint of that truckload being delivered to the receiver point, because we're the endpoint. We're measuring what's been removed from the field. We just tie in then what's been applied and from fuel and to fertilizers. And that actually kind of ties in together. So that's where we kind of see the vision of it. We're not there, we're a long way off, but that's kind of where we see that automation of that carbon information to be collected and processed. Okay, so the sensor, as you might be aware, we now have two models. So the CropScan 3300H, really that's driven off a Windows platform. And what that means is the scanners and the sample heads are very similar. Okay, so don't really get too, oh, that sample head looks like that. They're the same to me. Really, it is the operating system that the data is being collected into and processed. Okay, so the 3300H is a Windows platform, whereas the VT is now a Linux platform. Okay, the reason we use Linux is because it is an ISO-bus system and Windows cannot work in that environment. So we had to redesign the whole platform that the software works off. So what have we got? We've got a sample head. So the sample heads, any type, any model, any brand, any color, will sit on the outboard side of the clean grain elevator. Okay. So if you get a dealer who wants to put it on the inside, stop them quickly. Because if you really look at what we're doing there is we're taking grain off the paddle that's going at a very high frequency, and we're feeding it into the chamber at about it's not 45 degrees, but let's say 30-degree angle into the chamber. We're trapping it. We're taking the scan and doing that. So really the straightness of the sample head is key to maintain grain flow and blockages. Okay, so the sharper that 3300H sample head is, the better. All the new kits come with templates, so it's very it's difficult for them to get it wrong, but you know your dealers. So just a little bit of pointing on that. The 4000 just has a straight sample head and then it returns it back in. That was just due to simplicity and trying to have a new shape, I suppose. The NIR spectrometer. So the 3300H NIR spectrometer still sits within the cab, okay, because it's in a fiberglass enclosure, whereas the 4000 is now outside, okay. To the user, that really doesn't make a big difference at all. To the installer, it's easier to fit it outside than inside. That's the only real difference there. Within the CropScan spectrometers, you have all the power supplies and a microcontroller. The microcontroller operates all the scanning functions and features. So that's really the brain box of the system. The sample head is dumb to me. It's not affected by heat. The only thing you've got to get right in there is the probe position. Then we're outputting the data within a terminal or a display. And as we can see, the 3300H has got a Windows Surface Go 4 10.4-inch tablet. It uses Bluetooth connectivity to that spectrometer box now. So the only cable going to the tablet is power and possibly a CAN bus harness. The 4000, well, there is no extra monitor in there, and it's all run through a VT on the New Holland machines or the Case IH machines, okay? We have not gone down the path of the other brands yet, but what we are, the next, happy to tell everyone, the next one off the cab, off the rank we'll be looking at is the class. So we do have we're just in the final testing with class in the CAN bus, and so that is an option we're exploring doing that. So running the VT through a class combine. AGCO will be the next one. But unfortunately, John Deere, the messages and in CAN bus information is proprietary, and due to them having their own system, we're a bit limited on that, partnering on that information. So how does it work? The CropScan sample head is mounted to the outboard side of the clean grain elevator. Okay, they all have a flat door. The flat door will close and trap the grain. Inside the chamber, there is a sample sensor that is basically designed to say the chamber is full. When we know the chamber is full, there's a 12-volt bipin lamp inside the sample head. That's a high-intensity lamp that basically shines the light or energy onto the surface of the seeds. Once those seeds are illuminated, it's really the heat energy is exciting the seeds, and the molecules within the seeds are actually vibrating and oscillating. And that's what we're really measuring. We're measuring the absorption of energy on the seeds. And that's collected through the fiber and then sent back to the NIR spectrometer box. Okay. But really, what we're trying to do here is make sure we've got the probe in the right spot. That is key. That is CropScan 101. I've had instances where I've asked the farmer, is the probe in the right spot? And they said, oh, what's the probe? And I went, ooh, okay, we've got a problem here. So it's really important to understand the functionality of the sample head. We've got about 4 or 5 bits and pieces in there. There's a flat door. The flat door has to trap the grain. The grain cannot be moving while we do the scan. When I say moving, a little bit of movement's fine, but continual movement of the grain past the lens as we're doing the scan. So the scan is 1 second. And what it does is it scans 38 points, but it does it sequentially. So 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. So you'll get distortion in the scan if that grain is not stabilized. Okay. So if you've got a little gap there and you've got canola and it's bypassing through, the NIR scanner in these transmission systems will not work well because that grain has to be perfectly trapped. Okay. So there's sensors within the doors that can be adjusted and recorrected. It's quite easy. That's really farmer operated capabilities. It's just a couple of screws and bolts and those sorts of things. Okay, then we've got the lamp. The lamps last a long time. We sell all the parts. So how many lamps have I sold in 13 years? Not many, less than 10 out of 1,000 units. So the lamp longevity is very long. We provide a spare one in the kit. Just note, If you change anything optical, the machine has to be re-referenced. Re-referencing is just measuring the lamp intensity and setting that up. So if you are changing a lamp and you think you're doing the right thing, maybe just reach out to your dealer or to us, and we'll kind of guide you on those steps to do that. But most of these things are, you guys can kind of tweak and adjust yourselves. A phone call from us and guidance is pretty easy. Then we've got the fiber optic probe. The fiber optic probe is collecting the signal. So that's really the key fundamental bit. So you don't want to make sure there's no moisture in the lenses. A scratch here and there, that's not a big deal. A bit of buildup of material, not ideal, but not the end of the world either. The buildup of the material has to be quite heavy on the lenses to kind of cause a big distortion. Okay. But the probe, if that's in the wrong spot, you're really going to get too little light or too much light. So let's put it into context. If the probe was all the way out, and what I mean is the probe is the fiber that will go back and in. So these probes here have the ability to slide in and out. And that's basically managing the energy throughput through the lenses. So if we're too far out and we've got canola in the chamber, what do you think is going to happen? Really, the signal through the grain, so the light energy going through the grain is going to be zero at certain parts on the camera. Okay, so it doesn't really like to multiply something by a zero or negative number. So you're really measuring nothing. If you put crap in, you're going to get crap out. So the only way we can manage the signal throughput of the grain is by physically moving the probe. So when you go to the silo, they have an automated probe adjustment mechanism in there, and the probe will drive itself in when it's doing canola. It'll drive itself out a little bit when you're doing wheat. It'll drive itself out when you're doing like a fava bean. We have a physical manual probe position. So generally we'll be starting in canola. So push that probe all the way in so it's hard up against the stop. I actually put pressure with my hand and tighten the lock nut. That's going to make sure you get it all the way in. And then that 7 millimeter gap is going to manage the signal throughput and keep that constant. Okay, the new systems also have some screens in there as well to keep any admixture and kind of rubbish pods out of the canola. Okay, the sensor only measures 2% of the light energy. The sample absorbs the other 98%. So if that probe is in the wrong spot, it's not very difficult to be now measuring less than 1% or less than 0.5% of the signal. Okay, so probe, really critical. The NIR spectrometers, they really then collect the signal and they'll compute the scan against the model and produce and output the results to the screen. We don't have to get too involved in that, but they have their own heating systems and mechanisms to heat them up to about 35 to 40 degrees. The computer inside or in the cab will basically just collect the results and then display it within the different run screens. So within the run screens, we'll be displaying the protein, the oil, the moisture. So depending on the crop type, they're already pre-configured with the different attributes that we have calibrations for. So generally your cereals will be protein and moisture. Okay, your oil seeds will then have oil in it. Corn is going to have protein, oil, moisture, corn, and starch. Not that that's very big here. Oats has oil in it. What else? Lupins and lentils is just your protein and moisture. Okay. Some calibrations will perform better than others. And we are seeing the more feed barley that's being produced and the rougher it's produced, it can cause wilder results in the barley just due to the poor sample presentation to the sensor. The sensors are designed to measure good seeds. So wheat and canola, even with a bit of admixture in there, it's going to give you a pretty good result. But the barley, if you got really long horns on it, it can produce some, because all it's measuring is that light transmit through the seed. So it wants to measure the seed, not the horns. So a little bit of the warning there. The automation of the combine should really clean that up. But if you turn that off in barley and want to run it rough, well, the rougher the sample is, the rougher the numbers will be. The screens really then have three main run screens: setup, field data, grain tank data. So features between the systems. Okay, so let's go to this slide first. Okay, so the 3300H is an aftermarket solution that can be fitted to any model and brand of combine. When I say any model, if you're running a really old case, I'm not that great on the models, but I think it's a 77 something, or early 2000s with the 45-degree elevator, you're really going to struggle to fit the sample head. So what you're looking for is your combine has a pretty nice free open space on the outboard side of the clean grain elevator. The sample head can be mounted on that side. So we've got systems for Case IH, Class, New Holland, John Deere, AGCO. So really any machine. There's different platform kits for different models. So there's an X9 kit and an S series kit. Pricing will slightly change depending on if you've got a bigger combine, it's generally going to cost a little bit more because the cables are longer on these bigger machines. Okay. All right. And then the 4000 series is only applicable to Case IH and New Holland combines. So we've got platform kits for 50 series, 60 series. So they're the new ones coming out this year. The AF9, 10, and 11 won't be here, but the CR 8 dot, 9 dot, 10 dot, and CR10 and 11. Okay, so we've done the development with CNH in on that. Okay.
The CropScan tab.
Okay, so features and functions. Okay, so the 3300H is running a Windows tablet, where the 4000 VT is running a Linux PC. So there's no second screen in the cab. In the 4000s, we do provide you a tablet bracket, so you can run an iPad next to it or an Android, so run the Engage on there. Okay, the 3300H has a CAN bus harness. So that has an adapter to plug into the combine. Okay, so CNH, Case and New Holland machines. And they're dating back, I think we've just added in the 8230. So we've actually gone back pretty far now. So 2013, 14 models that we have the CAN bus capability. What that gives you is the crop flow. So it gives you yield coming into the machine at the same frequency as the CropScan protein data. It also gives you tank weight accumulation. So for every tank load, it will accumulate the weight, and that data is then outputted to the CropScan. For the class users, we'll be including the CAN bus, that the hardware is there. We're just getting the final validation from class over the winter. So if you bought a new CropScan from class this year, you'll get the harness included. If you have one for the last couple of years, you can just order that. There's a part number there for the harness. It's roughly about $2,100, $2,200 for that. You get software and you get the CAN bus harness to do that. So on the 4000, well, it's an ISO bus system. So that is fully integrated into the combine. Same, it's giving you all your crop flows, your auger sensor, your crop types. There's a full suite of CAN bus messages that is coming in there. APIs are identical. So the features and functions within the software, diagnostics is the same, calibration is the same. The only point of difference is grain logistics. There's more features on the Windows display than the VT. And secondly, a moving map in the Windows tablet versus there's no moving map in a VT. The graphics cannot be created in a VT environment. 3300H, the spectrometer is mounted inside the cab, whereas the 4000 is mounted outside the cab. So really, there is a price difference between the units. You're probably looking at a few $1,000s. And really that comes down to the SIM card subscriptions and availability. So the 3300, they come with 1 year SIM and Harvest Manager, whereas the 4000s come with a 5 year. And that's really the difference in pricing of the units. As we went through, these are the different models and configurations and screens that would be kind of compatible.
The CropScan tablet has booted up and connected to the NIR spectrometer, the system is ready to go. For CAN bus systems, the CropScan will automate the crop type change from the combine monitor and the start operation for when the combine rotor switch is engaged. Field IDs will be pre-populated through the Auto Field Select function. This is available when running version 17 of the tablet software. Note, You will need field boundaries within Field Ops or JD Ops Center for the Auto Field Select function to work. Once the rotor is engaged or the Start button is pressed, the CropScan will go into the active mode and the system will begin scanning when the sample chamber is full. The setup screen will display the running average results for protein, moisture, oil, and yield. Operators can toggle between the different run screens within the CropScan tablet. Field data displays the real-time data for each data point. The upper table will show the field average and the current tank average. The last reading is an average of the last 5 scans. Real-time field maps will be displayed as point data. The user can toggle between layers by pressing on the map screen. The protein average for each tank will be recorded within the tank data screen. The tank reset is controlled by the unloading auger opening and closing. Additionally, at this point, the CropScan will send the grain tank transaction and agronomic data to the N-Gauge app. Note: the CropScan requires internet connection and to be signed into the user's N-Gauge account via the Setup menu within the CropScan tablet. The N-Gauge will sync the grain transfer transactions and present the data within the grain logistics module. The grain transfers will be identified as a combine harvester icon in the app when running in the tank data mode. Users operating in the storage logistics mode will see the transaction appear within the selected site storage location, which was selected in the CropScan 3300H tablet. An example of this would be when the user selecting the grain cart from the location list during the auger cycle. These modes can be switched within the grain logistics setup menu. The app will update the new received transaction by swiping down on the app. In this example, we can see the CropScan combine incrementally increasing each grain transfer. The history loads can be viewed by carrying out a long hold press on the storage icon. If we switch to the Nutrient Manager part of the app, users can view their protein, moisture, oil, and yield layers. The field data is updated every auger cycle. The map layer data will append to the boundary for protein, moisture, oil, and yield. Non-Canvas system will require their yield to be manually imported to the CropScan Ag portal. Users can update or modify layer legends to drive more detail within the map and data. New legends can be created quickly by pressing on the New tab, entering a name and setting the number of ranges and distribution. Users can choose their color of choice and then apply to all fields for a season. The CropScan 4000 VT is all operated through the Case EH, or New Holland Combine monitors. Once the ignition key is switched on, the display will boot and the CropScan VT will become available from one of the run screens. We suggest running the VT on the upper monitor. The VT will open up in the setup screen. This is where the operator can set the crop type and grower farm and field. Note the crop type will change upon selecting the crop type in the main run screen, and the grower farm field will auto-select off entering the boundary. If you don't have boundaries, you will need to manually select the field ID. Once the setup page is set, the CropScan will wait for the rotor to be engaged and go into the active mode, whereby the sample head will wait for the chamber to be filled. And Gauge Harvest Manager is your dashboard for your harvest data, straight from the combine to your mobile. Harvest Manager comes included in all new CropScan 3300H and 4000 VT models. The 3300H model comes with a 1-year Sim and Harvest Manager subscription, where the 4000 VT includes 5 years for both Sim and the Harvest Manager. Harvest Manager helps farms manage their grain inventory, from tracking the grain from the field to the grain buyer. Users can start by creating a virtual farm storage site. Simply create all your grain carts, field bins, trucks bags, and silos. Once you have your site designed, you are ready to go. Users can use the app to manage grain transfers from one site storage to another. Grain can be blended easily to meet a grain contract. Need something to help manage those grain contracts? Harvest Manager enables users to create a grain contract against a buyer. Enter the buyer name, grain type, contract amount, contract number, grade and price. You're all now set to deliver grain against a contract. Fill a truck full of grain, select that icon and the grain contract you wish to deliver against. Transfer the grain and confirm. Review the contract by pressing on the grain contract icon. The field average and tons of grain removed from each field will update in the header bar. Reports can be created and shared with your trusted advisors. Field maps for protein, moisture oil, and yield can all be viewed within the Harvest Manager app. Pinch and zoom and select a field boundary to view a field. Select the layer type from the layer picker.
Okay, so that's Harvest Manager. Okay, so the concept of Harvest Manager is packaging and including that with the sensor to basically give the user a real good overlay of the data and usage of the data in a nice, easy, simple format away from the combine. So if you've got some workers and they're operating the machine, all that transaction data should be coming to you. Okay, yes, there's some levels of complexity of managing them in bits and pieces, but you know, if I look down to the future, and I think we'll be looking at automating that grain tracking and doing that. And there's ways to do that with tags and bits and pieces and automation of identifying different different storages. So the more you play with it, the more you're going to get used to it of where that's going to fit within your within your farming system. At the very least, it will just collect it as the combine. So if you've got 4 machines and you've got 4 combines, that data will just be collected. If you don't move it, it will just bundle and accumulate the data for all the different crop types and bits and pieces. You know, this is Broden's account who gives us access to do these demos and bits and pieces. That's really, you know, they use that throughout all of Harvest. They've got 2 combines, you know, many trucks, or they've trained everyone within the system. And Broden says, I can't live without that now. Yeah, that's a feature that they really kind of use and manage in doing that. They're running John Deere, so they've got the cart weight system. So the volume of grain is actually transmitted back from the LibreCart. And we do that with some transceivers, one in the cart and one in the combines, each combine. And they'll basically trigger and record the weight of the tank each time it empties into it. So that trigger is off the auger opening. It'll ask for the starting weight, do the finishing weight, and then tally the net weight of that transfer of grain. So for the John Deere customers, we will be including that part of the that part of the kit, you know, as a factory fitted, or from us as a fitted solution. So making sure they have those transceivers and those sorts of things in the kit, because we don't have that CAN bus kind of capability. So that kind of fills that gap there of doing that. From the mapping, really, just be clear, it's just visual maps. It's just pretty maps. So you may not be ready to do very right. You can do one of the trials and have a play around, but if you're not ready, there's no use paying the subscription service until you're ready. I really think you should be creating maps from year 1 to year 2, maybe 2 to 3. Don't go past that. You'll just get into that data collection process. It's really important for us to get you using the data. You don't have to do the whole farm, but just doing some maps from year 1 to 2 or 2 to 3. That's really critical. That if I look back and look at the ones who started early, they really still haven't made a map because they're in a data collection stage. The systems and processes of the data flow just wasn't there yet. So they were always heavily reliant on USBs and a lot of heavy lifting. I'm very appreciative you've got lots of things to do. Okay, you're wearing lots of hats. You're the manager, the mechanic, the accountant. There's a lot going on in the farm. So I'm very appreciative of that. What I'm trying to do here is really simplify this process. If we can make the sensor run right, you've got really good clear zones for your nitrogen uptake to the plant. So next little video, and the reason I use the videos is I can't keep up to the videos and throw all the words in. So the little AI voice thing is really handy to do that. So we'll do one more video, and that's on the Nutrient Manager. So that's a subscription opt-in service. It's about, the price has changed a little bit. It's $1,800 per year as of the 1st of May, which is pretty comparative to other, you know, mapping services and bits and pieces. The other clear point is we We use FarmWorks in the background and SMS. So using those programs is generally taking, let's say a farm has got 40 fields. That's about a 3 days worth of work for us to basically produce all the maps, print them in a little booklet, analyze it and do that. The Engage would allow you to do that size of farm in about 4 hours. So yes, 4 hours is long, but it's a lot shorter than 3 days. So just being appreciative of processing data does take a lot of time. So the Engage app is very fast, efficient. To this point, I think we can, even make it 20 times faster as we push and learn more.
Engage Nutrient Manager is a subscription-based software for growers ready to begin their variable rate journey. The Nutrient Manager is designed to make creating applications simple and easy. Begin analyzing your yield and protein performance. Use the built-in analytics to generate a yield by protein correlation map. This helps identify the moisture-limited zones versus the nitrogen-limited zones. Select the field, enter the target protein and average yield value to quadrant the data. Enter your phosphorus and potassium nutrient removal factors. Once the analytics is complete, the following layers will be available on the layer picker: nitrogen removal, performance map, phosphorus removal, potassium removal, and sulfur removal. These additional layers give growers a simple zoning mechanism for nitrogen and other nutrient replacement strategies. To create an application, press on the plus icon to create a gridded or contoured application map. Enter the crop type for that year. Implement type, product, and AB line if available. Selecting an AB line will create the grids in the direction of the AB line heading angle. Once a management zone layer has been created, fertilizer rates can be entered against a zone. Edit the layer by doing a long hold press on the layer type and select the Edit Layer option. Enter the required rates against each highlighted zone. In this example, we would increase the nitrogen rate in the yellow zone and reduce the rate in the blue zone. The green zones are generally at the standard average rate, and the red zones are problem zones which may need further investigation. Once the rates are entered, the zones can be changed, be edited to better suit the farmer's knowledge. Clean a bit of noise up, and smoothing the zones out is easy and simple with the 3 edit tools. Select and highlight the zone or grids, and then select the new zone. Once the application is processed, the rates and new zones will appear in the application layer. For other application types like MAP and DAP, the user can also edit and enter fertilizer rates. The zone creation function for phosphorus and potassium are based off yield and the amount of kilograms of nutrient removed per ton of grain. Users can work out a simple replacement strategy with their agronomist and begin applying variable rate M, AP, or DAP. The options are endless with the Nutrient Manager. We have users creating lime and gypsum maps, so we have all nutrients covered. Lastly, the Nutrient Manager will tally up the applied fertilizer in the Reports menu. Select the fertilizer reports, choose the fertilizer, and year to view for the field totals. Each field will show the field average per fertilizer total and the sum of all the fertilizers required.
So all that being good and well, it really then working out the strategy on how to use it. So here's an example case study that we've just done with Leon and Sarah Clark, who farm out at Lake Grace in Western Australia here. They bought systems, I think they bought one in 2019 roughly, and another in 2020. And so they've got them on their 290, 250s. They've just last year gone for new combines and gone for the 4000 series. And so what they've been doing is mapping and collecting the data. And last year, really, they got to a point where, having the second machine, filling in the gaps and collecting copies of data allowed them to then identify parts of the farm. And this is one example where protein was low. And in this scenario, the yield was low as well. So it had a correlation with low protein and low yield. So really, that's an area of a little bit of uncertainty. Is it nitrogen? Is it phosphorus? Is it some other, something else leaking out of the bucket? So Leon had been following what kind of Broden was doing and was very interested in his strategy and how that was working on their farm. So Leon's a bit of a go-getter. So he thought, no, I'm going to give this a go. So we've created all their variable rate applications for nitrogen last year across the whole farm. So we're talking probably 60 to 80 fields So 80 applications for nitrogen. This year we've done MAP and nitrogen. So we're actually doubled that. So there's 160 maps that's kind of being created. I think there's another nutrient. They've got some mix as well. So there's actually another 60. So the 180 maps that actually we've created for that farm with them through Engage. So what they've done, identified the low protein area. Okay, that's a good indicator that the crop was limited by nitrogen. Okay, so I think it was barley in the year before. So they've gone to a variable rate strategy, topping up the lower protein zones with a higher rate of nitrogen. An extra 100 kilos has been applied across this 32 hectares. And really the output of the return was an extra ton of grain. So really that's gone from the worst part of the field to the best part of the field just with nitrogen. So the sensor was actually a nice simple way of identifying it. Nothing else in the system was able to do that. We create the maps and then we apply it. So really that's an extra $300 across that zone, or across the whole field, a $65 return. And we're pretty much finding this pretty commonly. Lots of the guys are saying it's worth a couple of $100,000 to me now. If you're running one machine, if you're running two, it could be 400. Because remember, that opportunity across 10 years, it's probably there 5, 6 out of every year. You're going to have some droughts and bits and pieces across that. So it's really stacking up the years and understanding where your nitrogen variability is, and just having that lever to kind of pull that and applying it in the right place and at the right rate is really then going to gain those returns across the 10 years. So if you can now improve 10, 15% across the farm there, that's really going to show some big improvements in the profitability of the farm. Easy for me to sit here and say that, but really the biggest cause of the variability is the blanket rate. You are over and under supplying nitrogen to the soil, to the crop, year in, year out, which is causing limited yields. It's causing haying off in dry years, probably some frost effects and bits and pieces as well. So it actually stacks up logically to start to begin approaching the variable rate nitrogen. Okay, the sensor does a very good job of picking it up. If the plant is not converted and seeing the nitrogen, it's a really good indicator that it was inadequate. What's the reason that it wasn't there? We didn't apply enough. There was a fence there. There's elevation. There's a reason in behind that the plant is not receiving the nitrogen. When you can understand that, well, now you can start to pull that lever and kind of to fix that. And we start to see now the variability kind of tightening up. So ROI, you've just got to put yourself within the table of matrix, and if you're 2,000 hectares or 10,000 hectares, this is the kind of opportunity that sits there. As long as you use the data. If you don't use the data, you will not get the return. Okay, it's really what you put in into what you put out, and understanding that it's not a full automated system from the point of harvest, collecting your protein to yield, to the application jumping in the spreader and doing it itself. There is some friction points along the way that you've got to tackle and do that. But remember, we're here to support and help. The nutrient manager provides us a means of building that part of the business and providing you support in doing that. So anyone with the nutrient manager pretty much has full access to us to kind of, tweak little things. I had a guy yesterday, he changed all his boundaries. So he calls up, we just guide him and he fixed that up pretty quickly. So we have that data technicality to kind of help you, coach you through and get you through to that point. So the benefits, we used to talk all about blending grain and doing that. You probably noticed that was pretty limited in this talk. The nitrogen is the big driver, and that is what we feel is going to drive that change and the adoption. To me, it's all about the adoption of variable rate. Even if you don't buy a CropScan, I really want you to do variable rate in some form. It's got to be better than the blanket rate approach that is commonly being adopted. Okay, I've done this enough for 10 years. I've looked at maps all around the world. The ones who action it, they would go really well. The ones who don't and kind of get in the cycle, they're the ones that we've got to help and support and nudge. And everyone's the same. Don't think that Broden did all this himself. he had lots of people around him to help and ask questions and bits and pieces. So yes, he's an exceptional farmer and that top tier kind of, but there were people around to kind of help and do that. We continually talk about the maps and bits and pieces. Grain inventory and management to the marketing. Well, that's always there. So if you can kind of take that data and improve it, well, that's going to be a benefit to the farm. And overall, if we can't make it more profitable, sustainable, we haven't achieved our goals.
The CropScan protein data has verified some of my thoughts. I've got some hidden hunger, so that is areas that have got reasonable yield but really low protein. I think that I can add nitrogen to those areas that are going to lift my yield and increase my protein, which will help my bottom line.
There's some real powerful words from Craig Warren. Craig farms in Temora in New South Wales with his brother-in-law and sister and wife. So Craig's an agronomist for Nutrient. So we did these videos a couple of years ago, but we kind of pulled it out of the archives. A really powerful what, Craig kind of knows this. He kind of sees the vision there. And Craig was a real influencer in that area to kind of lead the charge in getting growers to adopt the CropScan and doing that. So he sees it. He knows that low protein is a good indicator of opportunity zones that across the farm that they can start to target. Okay, so we'll kind of open it up the Q&A. So let me turn everyone's microphones on because it's probably a bit easier for me to manage that. So give me a second while I turn the microphones on. If you want to think of some questions, and then we'll just kind of go around the table. I can then jump between the software and the app and that and kind of explain things. So give me 1 minute to turn all the microphones on. Now, what I'll do is I'll allow you to unmute yourself. That's probably the best thing. So if you want to ask a question, just unmute. And then if we get two at the same time, we'll be polite and we'll let someone go first. Okay, so you should be able to unmute yourself. So I know a few people. Clint, can you just test that for me? If you unmute your microphone and you can just...
I've got you, Matt.
Awesome. All right. So thanks for joining, Clint.
Thanks for having me.
Again. Did you have a question for me?
I don't really, Matt. No, everything's sort of pretty fresh still from my previous life, I guess. But yeah, no, good to see the 4000 VT coming along nicely. So it'd be nice to be able to, I don't know if there's an option somewhere down the track to be able to Bluetooth or something like that to a standalone screen instead of being on the can for the John Deeres or anything like that. They're a nice install unit compared to the 3300s, I reckon. So yeah, it'd be nice to be able to get some of that stuff on the outside of the Johnnies as well.
Okay, yep, good, very good point. Okay, so we do have it in the roadmap to the 4000 VTs have a Bluetooth module pre-installed. So we kind of already have in the roadmap of the hardware's already there. And we will develop, can't say it's this year or next year, but we will develop a Bluetooth module. So the data is not relying on going via the cloud. It will just Bluetooth to the app sort of thing, okay? The other one is pretty happy to say we are toying around with the data from the hardware straight to field ops. So we're playing around with sending the data to field ops in real time. So not only send it to our portal, but it will go to that portal. So we're kind of in the development of that. There's no real hidden secrets there. The other one for John Deere will be adding in the API for yield data to come into the Engage daily. So we currently check daily for new fields and boundaries, and we'll add the addition of the yield data. Post that, then we'll be looking at applied data, so applied nitrogen. So kind of pulling that in, and that will automate nitrogen use efficiency within the Harvest Manager. The last thing is all those, the people who are running Nutrient Manager and subscribing, they will eventually have a feature where all those quadrant maps, they're produced at the hardware level. That's the kind of vision we're going with that. So we'll there's some of the testing that we'll be doing at Harvest for a release next year. So anyone, that doesn't matter which machine you got, you can have a 3300 and using Nutrient Manager, and you'll have a feature in there that those quadrant maps are done at the hardware level, so you'll have a map for that in real time. The end removals all calculated, those sorts of things.
Beautiful. Cheers.
Okay. It's always good when you talk to the guy who makes the decisions. I'm happy to share with, where we're going. Yeah, so if you've got a question, just jump on. If not, I will just then jump into the live kind of screens and kind of just make some points in calibration and doing that. So I did prepare a bit of a list of some questions that, I'd already thought of. We've kind of gone through what is the grain analyzer, what crop types, how accurate. Okay. What I always kind of put forward is how accurate is the receival cycle? Okay, have you got two machines in one testing stand? We know that you can pull the same sample in the one on the left and get a different result on the one on the right. Wheat is generally pretty good. You're going to be talking 0.1, 0.2, but that's still an error. It's not absolute. Okay, it could be, and don't think it's always 0.2 high, or it could be 0.2 low. So now we've got a 0.4 variation. So at the very best, if the Infotech read 0.2 low and we read 0.2 high, there's a 0.4 difference there automatically. But we're all still measuring within the limits of the requirements and doing that. So when I look at the accuracy, I pour 100 samples in the machine. I've got an Infotech and I compare the two and I statistically just compare the differences. So statistically, I can get it within about 0.2 to 0.3 for protein, and even under 0.2 for moisture. But that's against my one machine that sits in my perfectly air-conditioned environment. We have it calibrated and managed. When you add in a factor of multiple machines at different sites and different environments, it gets pretty wild. The Infotech probably within the GrainCorp sites is only as good as 0.35. And the barley is probably only as good as 0.6. So when you start to really look at how accurate things are, well, we can't be better than the buyer. And that's kind of how I address it and look at it. But we make the systems adjustable so you can fine tune, and I'll show you this on the real screen, how you can fine tune and adjust it and what strategies there are to do that. Who's using a CropScan 3300H or 4000? There's over 1,000 installs around the world. So there's lots of universities. I just had a call from Sydney University in their unit, and they've got a sensor failure. So I said, send the sample head back and we'll kind of give it an overhaul and do that. So I think the CSRO and Sydney Uni have about 7 units, okay? There's a few of the DPIs in universities in doing that. Overseas, there's lots of universities and researchers. We haven't had a big adoption in the farmer market. The farmer market in Australia is that. So yeah, it could be a farm from 750 hectares to 50,000 hectares. That's the range of customers that we have under the banner. Can the data only be used in real time in the combine? Well, if you're an owner operator, the 3300H really gives you good opportunities within the display to manage it all at the point of harvest from there. You don't really need the app. You're sitting in the header with the screens in front of you. The app really then comes to life if you're not in the machine and doing that, okay? Or you've got 2 machines and you're getting the data from the other machine coming through. So remember, if you've got 2 combines and you're the main owner operator, you're seeing all the data coming from that machine into your app. You can just let Johnny over there do his thing and just give him some bits and, oh yeah, you might want to adjust that up or down a bit, Johnny. What are the benefits? Well, it's really that nitrogen management, that grain inventory, and overall improving the profitability and sustainability of that. Some questions that I don't have on there, which are always asked: how do I calibrate it? How should I calibrate it? And they're kind of the main ones. So let's jump into that now. Any questions?
Joining us on today's webinar. Be sure to catch us next week on our data utilisation session with Ed Scott. Additionally, we have Troy Blair from CNH to give a field ops overview and demonstration of sending a prescription to a CNH monitor. And lastly, we've got a Q&A with 3 growers who will be joining us to share their experiences with the CropScan on combine grain analyzers. So thank you, and we'll catch you next time.
should be able to see that first slide there now.